Hey everyone, welcome to The Grind. We are wrapping up our series. I got it right. We are wrapping up our series, Covenants. We're talking about the new covenant today. I think there are, how many are there? I think there's 7 covenants in the Bible, at least. And
I thought you said 8.
8? My bad. 8 covenants.
No, don't. Be right back. Just keep going. I'll chime in. It's 7. Okay.
I was right.
2,000 years later.
Yeah. So, anyways, 7 covenants. We didn't cover all of them, but we covered some of the key ones. And today, like we mentioned, we're going to cover the new covenant, which is what Pastor Ed landed his series on. So basically, the heart of the covenant is that we're dwelling with God, that God will be our God and we'll be His people. So let's talk a bit about what was it like for us living pre-covenant versus in covenant with the Lord.
I think the first thing that pops into my head is definitely I have security now. Mm-hmm. I think it's security that in believing and recognizing the consistency of His character. Mm-hmm. Look at the Israelites. Mm-hmm. They've seen when they were in the wilderness, they've seen how God's been good before, mm-hmm. but they still had room for unbelief, mm-hmm. for them to be like, nope, I still don't believe in Him. Mm-hmm. And I think in the modern day we've fallen for that stigma, that when someone makes a promise, you just have that inclination to doubt it. You're not too sure that they could keep it. But I guess that's the contrast with me now, is that I know God's been good before, therefore God's going to be good mm-hmm. in the present and future. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and nothing can sway me from that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's a whole bag of mixed feelings for me, because it's kind of like the Matrix, mm-hmm. where you want to stay happily in sin, or the law shows your sinfulness, mm-hmm. and so you're aware of all the sinfulness in you, in others, in the world, and on one hand you intellectually know that God is gracious, God is merciful, and He's gonna forgive you. And at the same time, you do know that you have to, obedience is more than sacrifice, mm-hmm. and then you have to actually work hard to achieve that and to respond to God's grace well. And so, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard.
Mm.
I think with the whole idea of living in covenant and outside of covenant, I think the first thing that comes to mind is a picture of freedom, because I think with freedom, the idea is we can do whatever you want, and then it's we have this rules that we have to follow. I don't want to do it because I want to do as I please. And I think sometimes we're a slave to the picture of freedom. We think we want to be free, but we paint as what freedom should be, and we're slave to that. But I think I'm reminded of Galatians 5:1. It is for freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm and do not submit again to the yoke of slavery. And I think with the idea of freedom in the confines of covenant is that is within God's boundaries. And I think when we think what freedom is, we think we can do whatever as we please, but actually ultimate freedom comes from the Lord and living according to His commandments. And I think for me, living in pre-covenant and living in covenant, I think my image of what freedom is has evolved. It went from doing as I please, to what does it look like to live my life and experience this true freedom from expectations of the world. What does it look like to live under God's grace and covenant? And that's what really freedom looks like to me, where it's not held back by the lies and deceptions, but what God has called me to. So I guess that's how I would see it as. All right, so, and obviously it involves a change, right? I think that's one thing that Pastor Ed talked about is God wants to transform you from the inside out. And so there's a change in our heart, how he was mentioning that relationship and process, and it's the process of time where we become more like Jesus. And if we just focus on religion, it's all about changing just the outside. So how have we seen ourselves change?
I think there was a time where I actually questioned myself, mm-hmm. that when I was in a circumstance where either I was going to be stressed or anxious, mm-hmm. right? I should have been stressed or anxious, but I didn't feel it. And I started questioning myself, is this just, ignorance, bliss through ignorance, or is this actually just having a really firm foundation of faith? And I'm at the same time being like diligent. I'm not saying like, oh, Jesus, take the wheel, YOLO.
Yeah.
But like really, there were times where I'll be like, how come I am not anxious or stressed? I feel I should be, but I'm not. And I think that's one thing that kind of really set me like kind of like a culture clash within myself. Like, this is not normal, but yeah.
Well, it's still a work in progress, and is at first you're living towards worldly goals, and you're living for pleasures. You're working for status, wealth, and all that, and without really knowing the meaning of life. But after getting to know God, you realize there is one truth, absolute truth, which the world denies right now. Everything is relative, but that there is actually absolute truth, and you learned how the world came together, what's the purpose of people, what's a real relationship with God. And even though some of the worldly things are still important, but they are not the most important. The most important is to know God and get in line back to God. And I think that's the real treasure of having this faith.
Yeah. I think one thing that I always have struggled with has been identity. And I think as I'm living in this covenant, I realized that my identity is rooted not in what I have or what people say I am, but who God says I am, which is a child of God. And I think over time I have seen, as I'm again living, and dwelling with the Lord, and also process over time, it's like, how have I been growing as a child of God? How have I been embracing, this freedom that I have as a child of God? And again, process, it takes time. Like, I wouldn't say like, I'm 100% set in my identity, nothing can shake me. I mean, let's be real, things can shake me.
If only it was like that.
Yeah, if only I could just be set, and then whatever comes my way, it doesn't matter, come at me, foo, but like that's not, please don't let all things come at me. I don't think I cannot.
Speaking of agreements.
Yeah, please, no, disagree. I disagree with that, what I just said. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But have there been triggers though that make us default back to like say factory reset?
Yeah. Like stress from life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of Matthew 13, where the seeds fall on the ground, fall on the rocks and shallow ground. So it's easy to crush by the worries of life, especially for me. And I'm also kind of like how the psychology of addiction works. Is there's always this trigger. Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe it's this intense stress at your stage of life that causes you back to I don't know, alcohol or any other addiction, drugs, pornography, and everything.
Yeah. I feel I'd say like it's just old habits die hard, I actually really like what Pastor Ed said, like what you just said, right? That religion puts his commandments in our head but not in our hearts. Like that's actually so good that in your head you could always justify it. Like for example, you have beef with someone, your head says forgive them because your head knows what's right, but then your heart could be totally against it. So there's no point in like forgiving if your heart's not in agreement, right? I think it's especially it's those bad habits of like when something bad happens, I want to resort to my old habits, whether I want to numb myself with movies and games or distract myself, right? Or even like maybe like the other way of when there's a challenge, I do it with my own effort instead of like asking, like we're doing it with God, right? But I feel like these are just temptations, I think that really shines where your faith is at, when you're able to see those temptations of resorting to the old habits, and you're able to be like, nope, I'm gonna do the harder way and still stay on track with my faith. And I think though that's how you really get around these factory reset moments.
I think when things are like, feeling as though it's out of my control, then I go into the I need to control everything. I need to fix everything. It's within my power. I don't know if it's an older sibling thing where it's like I control the things, but I think that's just how I feel, and that's when I result into like, am I worthy? Do I need to do all? And then it becomes the whole religion, like I gotta do to make things happen, as opposed to like, hey Lord, can you help me please? So those are some triggers that happen.
Yeah, and I also really want to respond to what Dom said. It's exactly what I watch on the Bible Project YouTube channel. So like a temptation or hardship is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually like a B. God gave you a path to strengthen your relationship with Him, or you choose to fall into temptation and give into evil.
This kind of like it's interesting that we talk about this, because one of the interesting things that Pastor Ed talks about is that he says that we are the most accurate translation of the Bible. And when we talk about just temptations and stuff like that, sometimes like, am I really the most accurate translation? I feel like if people look at me, will they be inspired, or will they be like, oh gosh, I don't know about that?
When I heard that, I felt like, oh no, I'm the most terrible translation.
I was like, please don't look at me.
I remember in the on that Sunday when Pastor Ed said that, he said, "Oh, I see a lot of you just smiling at each other and not saying it." You're extra special, aren't you, ESV? But it also then challenges us, so I think there's something that someone has mentioned to me before, is like, oh, you may be the only Christ that they will meet. Because people on the streets, they may not necessarily pick up a Bible like, oh, this is the Bible. They're going to encounter you, and so technically you should be the most accurate translation of the Bible. Like, I know me being a little bit more of a public figure. I mean, we're technically public figures, but there've been moments where people like, oh, I saw you shopping at H&M with your mom, and I was like thinking, did I do anything stupid? Did I say anything that I shouldn't say? Wherever you are, you never know who you're going to encounter, and I think this is a challenge, is that we're supposed to be an accurate translation of the Bible. This is basically like the unofficial way of saying, like, hey, if you talk the talk, you better walk the walk. Exactly. So again, not doing this out of fear or religion, but because hey, if we have encountered Christ, we want to be an encounter of Christ to people around us. So at the end of the day, what covenant is basically what we are in alliance with, what we're in agreement with. So and our words have power, right? So what have we spoken over ourselves? One thing the pastor had talked about was he mentioned oh, sometimes, some of us would be like, oh, say, that kind of thing. Or maybe he's he mentioned something about people come from a line of divorces, and that's what we think our future is. But what has been some stuff that we have spoken over ourselves? Rewind to what she said.
If only I could just be set, and then whatever comes my way, it doesn't matter. Come at me, foo. But that's not. Please don't.
Speaking of agreements.
Please no. Disagree. I disagree with what I just said.
I think I definitely get called out about this recently. Again, I mentioned I'm gonna mention him 2 weeks in a row. Daniel Black.
Oh, okay.
He said this one line. He was sharing his growth in his faith, and God convicted him, and with that same message, He convicted me. So some backstory: this Daniel Black guy, he's a love preacher, so he preaches about love, and he said God told him, you can't sow seeds of love if you think you're not lovable. Right? And I was like, oh damn. Yeah. And then I heard God say what's the equivalent for me, and people have prophesied over me that I'm wise, I'm going to be a teacher, but then and then I'll be honest, when people said that, I took it with a grain of salt. I was like, okay, sure, maybe you're wrong, but we'll see, right? That's how I kind of accepted it. And then after Daniel Black said that, You can't sow seeds of love if you think you're not lovable. I said the same thing, that I cannot be wise if I'm constantly like judging myself and putting myself down. Like when people say, "Oh, you're so smart," oh no, I'm not. You know, I think that's me making alliance with this thing of saying like, yeah, I'm not fully receiving God's gift of wisdom. You know, I'm just saying like, I just take a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think I come from a line of offenses. So
What do you mean? Like,
people
tell us more.
around me tend to easily get offended.
Oh,
Yeah.
by
and-
you?
No. Well, yeah, actually, maybe because another agreement might be you might have tested for MBTI, and then my type, I don't know if that's accurate or not, is INTJ. So usually it's a cold analytic type, and that characteristic is, I don't know, direct and kind of usually isolated, and so maybe subconsciously I would agree with that, and kind of be entitled to it, and then say, okay, then I don't want to change that. I'm like this, so why should I change? And maybe not intentionally, but unintentionally, we would offend other people by your direct expressions or comments, and then but then the line of offenses would be easily get angry at imperfections or other people's stupidity, and and basically just having strifes in relationships, so not easily agreeable. And I've been keep praying for peace and forgiveness, because love is forgiveness, love is endurance, patience, and and also related to identity as well. So maybe during tough times, you would say something like, "Oh yeah, I'm really stuck at networking, so maybe I won't have many people connections," or "Oh, I'm really stuck in this place, or in this status, or in the condition, or my skin." Then maybe I've accepted it and refused to get healed.
I think that might be a hot take.
What?
I think sometimes the MBTI, it is accurate to some extent, but I think there are a few things that are inaccurate, but then they both it all together, and so when they say this is me, they accept all the others. They accept things that's not true about themselves, you know.
I think the MBTI is not meant to be like, gospel. It's supposed to be like a guideline of how you operate and how you interact with other people, like every personality test. I think if I were to take every single personality test in the world, I think I'll have like a slight disorder, because like you're gonna tell me like I'm different things. I'm a campaigner here, I'm an introvert here, I'm an extrovert there. I mean, right? I think it's supposed to give you a guideline to understanding yourself. And so sometimes people like are just so married to the personality type that they just agree with that. So, and even though maybe it's not all that it is, that, they just live it out because, and for myself, when I'm thinking about like, the lies or the things, the family history, right? You have like, one side where like, there is divorces rampant in one side of the family. Then you have another side where it's like, people don't know Jesus, or there's sickness and whatever, and sometimes you might wonder like, oh, will this be my legacy? And then like I think I don't really think about it, but if I do stop and think about it, I can just like spiral and again create a story in my head that doesn't exist. Maybe then it goes into then I'm not worth it. Am I really worth it? Is there meaning for my life? That kind of thing. And then what is and then is this it? Right? Maybe this is it, and then boom, I get stuck in this like I guess in the yoke of slavery to just these lies and deception.
Down the rabbit hole.
Down the rabbit hole, because it's the fun one to go down.
So you guys check yourself. MBTI, it doesn't define you.
So with that being said, I think the heart of the covenant, as we mentioned, is that God wants to dwell with his people. He wants to be our God and we his people. And the thing is that what are we making covenants with. It basically is to cut ties with ungodly alliances. So what does this mean for you guys?
I mean, like that really maybe overused like metaphor, right? That we are called into royalty,
Yeah.
right? So if you're living in royalty, don't live a peasant life.
Yeah.
Get rid of those peasant habits. And yeah, like I said, like old habits die hard, maybe, right? And so I think that's kind of the importance of this message is that like, hey, God's convicting us, like. Here's me giving like doing my end of the effort of like making like the best scenario for you, but you need to also like kind of meet halfway by like, you know, not ruining yourself to some extent. Yeah.
Same as what you said. Also, like one person cannot serve two
Yeah.
lords,
Masters. Yeah.
and so you have this covenant in front of you offered. Would you choose it? Again, back to the Matrix
The red pill
reference.
or the blue pill.
Which pill do you want?
Yeah. I think like it also involves intention on our part as well. What do you actively choose to step into, right? So once you've stepped into this covenant, Pastor Ed said that, you know, God will only bless if, what was it? He said an agreement between God and us in which God makes promises to us and requires certain conduct from us. And when we build an alliance with God, it begins with an agreement with God, which results in alignment with His will. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to step into covenant and receive all the blessings in the world without, you know, have proper conduct. So I think it's, again, how do we carry ourselves? And again, basis is relationship, not religion. So yeah. So the heart of the covenant is never religion, it's relationship. So
And it's like religion. If you fail, you receive consequences, negative consequences. But the really goodness of God is that He is always faithful, because like all these renewed covenants, even though people fail, He still stays the same and renewed covenant for you to get back to Him.
Yeah. So yeah, with that being said, break off agreement with ungodly alliances. Well, that's that for this week's grind, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.